Well, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Doomcast. I'm the regular host of this, Dan Empton, and I am sitting down with one of my friends who is a comic collector, comic dealer, and inventor, in a way. Videographer, photographer, but Jeremy, tell me a little bit about, I know, but tell people what you do and maybe kind of why I'm talking to you.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, that's definitely an intro that's about 10 times too long, I think. But
Okay.
yeah, I do a lot of stuff. I've been, I guess, I'm not really a full-time dealer by any means. I do like a few shows a year since probably about 2014 is when I started actually selling at comic shows. I've been a comic fan all my life, ever since like the animated X-Men stuff was probably the first, stuff that I watched on TV, and that kind of led into, oh, let's, read the comics too. And hello. Well, he's a fan now.
Sorry. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob. Hi. Everybody, this is Bob. Bob? So,
We have to leave that in, right?
I think we do have to leave that in. What do you call yourself as a dealer?
Like the name I sell under? Oh, so I go by No Coast Comics. I also have a YouTube channel under that name. Also sell on eBay, and I was on Pop Shop Live for a while, which was a live selling app that I started during COVID, and then Whatnot I'm on, but I haven't really done a lot of shows yet. But yeah, No Coast Comics, you can find me everywhere.
And you also invented and created a product called Comic Shell, which you were gracious enough to hand off to me. And I also have, I did award accidentally to somehow two Jason Krolls that watched this show. Yeah,
people.
so I had picked a comment at random from YouTube, and I wasn't sure who it was, and so I informed apparently the wrong Jason Kroll, who also watches the channel. I was like, yeah, he's like, well, I didn't comment. I was like, oh, okay. Is there another Jason Kroll? And turns out, yeah, there are two. Yeah, so I actually need to buy another one from you and then ship them both out. I still haven't done that yet, but they've been informed. I have their addresses. I know where you live.
So both Jason Krolls, congratulations.
Congratulations, Jason Krolls, the conquerors. Both of you are conquerors in our hearts. Anyway, so I wanted to sit down and talk about. I wanted to ask you, to start, as a person who's gotten into this and is dealing semi-professionally sometimes, what makes a comic book valuable? Like, if somebody didn't know anything about comic collecting to begin with.
Sure. So it's actually kind of funny because I made a video when I went back to college for video production, kind of about that in general, like how to value a collection. Really, the first things are, is the issue important? Does anything big happen in it? Is it a first appearance of a character? Is it, the death of a character? Is it the first, published work by an author or an artist, for example? And kind of right alongside that is age as well, because, you can have new books, and there's obviously outliers and, specific circumstances, but generally the older and more important a book is, the more valuable it's going to be. I mean, you can have a book that's, 60, 70 years old that has no demand, like Archie's, for example, like most of those, not a lot of buyers for them. There's a few issues like, the innuendo covers and stuff like that. But then you can have like a new book that, like something new happens, but it's a brand new character, we don't really know if it's, going to pan out. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's even more than that, but that's kind of like the big two. And then when you're dealing with old books, obviously condition is a big factor. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, when you mention like new characters getting introduced, stuff like, I mean, I'm thinking recently of like the big speculative stuff like Punchline in Batman '92.
Sure.
Kind of got used, but after Tynan got off of the title, I haven't really seen her too much. Spider-Boy, that whole thing with Dan Slott, he's still writing it. He's gonna have a whole Spider-Boy book, I guess.
Yeah, a whole new series, I think. Yeah.
I don't. After he's done with it, I don't know if there's gonna be demand for it or not. But beyond just the value of the book, we were talking about this earlier before we started filming, but there are some books that will end up being more valuable if they're graded, which, I mean, I guess we should probably cover. Grading obviously is encapsulation. You're sending it to CGC, CBCS.
I can kind of touch on that. Just allow me to elaborate a little bit more too. So like you send them down to Florida or wherever CBCS is. I don't know where their offices are, but CGC's in Florida. They assign a third party assessment to it. Supposedly 2 or 3 people look at every book. They come up with the consensus on what that grade should be, and then if you're collecting with the intention of, I guess having any concern for the value, it definitely helps you value a book because you can look and see, a book that has been assigned this grade, not really irrefutably, but by, professional, graders.
Right.
You can see sold, for this amount. And so, yeah, that definitely helps value when you're looking at it from that way.
Right on. Yeah. And I mean, there are places that you can look to see at least what or how many copies of that book are graded, and how many of a specific grade there are also.
Yeah, they call that
right.
the CGC census, and I'm sure CBS called it the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah. I think they're in like Texas,
Sounds right,
CBCS, which I know they're probably people who are serious collectors of graded books may not regard them as highly, those for whatever reason. I have found, however, working with them, phenomenal people. I mean, real easy to work with, real quick turnaround, have been great in my experience.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I definitely like their holder in a way, even more than CGC. As far as the plastic itself, I don't know how much you want to go into that, but I mean, yeah, I mean, CGC can be hit or miss. I mean, they're definitely, the big dogs in the industry. Just, they've been around longer. I mean, Steve that started CBS worked for CGC.
yeah,
For a long time, and then he, they had, something that caused him to leave. I don't really know the details. But,
yeah, who knows?
But yeah, so those are the big two, and yeah, CGC definitely carry more of a premium on a resale market. Well, I guess it's all resale at that point if you're selling a CGC book.
Right.
Versus CBCS, and maybe someday they'll level out a bit. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I definitely no hate for CGC either. I know that usually because of the fact that people tend to want to get their books graded CGC. The lines are shorter. There's also a lot of the same people will be at the same cons. With CBCS, sure. So I've gotten to know some of them, and that makes things much easier. But
I definitely like to get to know their process and their people more. So
yeah, and like I say, they're chill people. They're easy to work with. We started talking at a convention in town here in Des Moines, and we're talking about books that are kind of overvalued. One book in particular, which we were talking about, Wolverine '88, which. It's a damn cool cover, right? I mean, it's definitely recognizable. It's pretty iconic. But it was at a period, and this one is signed by Larry Hama. No big deal. No big deal there. But we were talking about the fact that, and by all means, you were just making sure it doesn't fall.
Slide, no, I want to save it there. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking out.
One, it suddenly became a really sought-after book and increased in price really quickly, and it's probably, I think that's leveled out now. What factors do you think made people start paying more for it? And do you think that's an overvaluation? Do you think that's on the level? Does it make sense? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of hard to tell because that was one of those books. I mean, like most books during COVID-19, everything just went like a rocket, spiked. And that book specifically, being, I believe that's the first Wolverine versus Deadpool. That's the first time they fight, isn't it?
As far as I know.
Yeah. So, why don't we just retake that and I'll just say it is. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay. As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Yeah. So that book specifically, it definitely, spiked just like a lot of books during COVID-19. Being the first Wolverine versus Deadpool, I know the movie plays a lot into that. I don't know if when it spiked, if that was even like public knowledge. That I mean that was way before, I guess, when that book really spiked, and then it came out later that well, I don't want to talk about any spoilers or anything, and nobody really knows, but the images that have been released online for the new Deadpool, movie, kind of line up with that. So we'll see what happens. I mean, no one really knows, but as far as that book specifically, and I mean, there's multiple versions. There's a newsstand, there's a deluxe, there's a non-deluxe, and I mean, there's a lot of them out there. I mean, I don't know if like the colors on the book have anything to do with it. I haven't checked how many are on the census,
Yeah.
but I mean, you get Wolverine fans, Deadpool fans, and yeah,
I mean, other than the fact that Wolverine and Deadpool meet and fight in that book, there's not a hell of a lot else that happens in it either.
yeah,
Because I remember picking this up newsstand in like whenever it came out, at like the On Q and Carol, and it was right like the issue prior. It was like Wolverine and Gambit, which is another cool cover. Like Adam Kubert covers were great, but they were also like there's a ton of books of that, and probably almost everything Wolverine from the '90s. It's not a rare book.
yeah,
It's not even. It's probably not that hard to find. You kind of hit on the fact that like during COVID, a lot of people started buying up books. Any thought on your own as to why that is, other than just like people kind of grasping at, anything, or maybe just people were bored?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people had a lot more time on their hands too. I mean, especially
Sure.
like people. I mean, it helped, getting a little bit of, more free time for that kind of thing. Whether it was a weird combination because a lot of people lost their jobs, and so, that definitely affected how much money they had to put into hobbies. But you had other people that kept their jobs that were, going out less, so they had more money to spend on hobbies. I think, if you're not going out to dinner, you're not going out to a movie. You have a little more funds to, put into other things.
Plus, if you get a $1,200 government check,
exactly.
suddenly,
yeah, I mean, whether you fall into either of those, camps, $1,200 is $1,200. I mean,
exactly.
So I think all that definitely attributed to the rise we saw across the board, but especially I think a lot of the key issues that were in the like $100 to like $300 range, they like doubled to tripled. It seemed like
Yeah.
in a sense of like 3 months. So it was kind of bizarre. And then obviously, like now we're at the point, after everything that we've been through economy wise, that we're almost back to that trend line. So if it drops any further than what we've done now, I mean that's definitely another indicator of a long-term recession or going into an official recession, I'd say, because
Of comic book
of
prices,
comic books,
yeah.
yes, of course. Because like if you look at like the trend line between like 2010 to now, giant spike back down to kind of where it should be had COVID not happened.
Yeah.
So I don't think that where we're at in the market right now is anything like spectacular. I think it's kind of a return to the norm price wise, not considering like the big monster books that are either driven by speculation right now, not from when COVID started, or long term, blue chip keys.
Yeah. I see people, I mean, a good example of something that spiked, I think, maybe a lot, but also for somewhat good reasons. Avengers 8, First King, is kind of, that's an obvious first appearance. So you've got like everything that you mentioned, right? It's an older book. Print runs weren't as huge, but probably still relatively big. So not a terribly hard copy of a book to find, but notable first appearance, right? Then you have on top of that, Kang now in the MCU. Yep. And, between Ant-Man and Majors being announced as playing him, all of that obviously spiked. I don't know, is there anything that you can think of example-wise that's had a huge effect, or maybe something that hasn't had any kind of a weird spike that it maybe should have?
I mean, I've got plenty of those. I mean, we can talk about Avengers 8, specifically real quick. So, I mean, like, sure, like any time villains are kind of the outlier, because for the most part, when villains are going to show up, depending who you want to call a villain, whose, side you're on, I guess.
Right.
Like, kind of the window, like, I mean, if you're looking to make money on that book, obviously it's kind of shorter and shorter, just because that release window from when a project is announced, to being cast, to comes out on streaming or theaters or whatever, to moving on to the next thing, is kind of getting was getting shorter and shorter. Now we're kind of resetting a little bit after the writer's strike. So there's a little bit of a gap there now. But it used to be like, that, and I've kind of gone away from this type of buying and selling. When I first got into, doing convention stuff, I was a lot more on the speculative buying just because it was easier to do. Honestly, less people were doing it in 2014.
Yeah.
And I've always been a collector. It's not like I look at, selling first and then, I mean, like, I basically buy books and sell books to buy more books. I mean, that's kind of,
Right.
it's never been anything that I've made a lot of money off of. It's always just, kind of padding my own collection, I guess you could say. But, so like Avengers 8, is a great example of that. But then it kind of hit at the same time as the economy doing this, and so it's been a roller coaster. And him still being in projects definitely extends that out. But honestly, now I think is a good time to buy that book if you're a Kang fan. If you're if you like, I really enjoyed the Loki show, so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how all that pans out this
Yeah.
season. So if you're looking for that book, I would say, again, no financial advice here, but if I found the book for a decent price, I'd buy it. Other books that have kind of come and gone like that, I'm trying to think of in the past, couple of years. Like the first, Spider-Man 2099, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I really enjoyed, all of the Spider-Verse stuff.
I used to love Spider-Man 2099 when I was a kid too, because that was like one of the first books that I bought on a newsstand. But it's
Yeah.
also like that wasn't a highly sought after book until
But,
like
and like, to touch on the print runs a little bit too. Yes, those Avengers early issues, there was a lot of them printed for sure, but like the thing was nobody was really conserving them back then. And
Yeah.
so to get a high grade copy of that book is, that's why it is that expensive, just because, bags and boards weren't really readily available. You couldn't go to your, your corner grocery store and get a bag and board along with the issue you were buying.
right, and you weren't like probably wherever it got stored, it would be in like a shoebox or an attic or
Yep.
something like that, and the chance that at some point, like a lot of people that age, and that would have been my dad would have been a kid. Probably they move out, their parents go through their stuff and they're like, well, they're in college now, they're not coming back. Oh, they, now they're 30, whatever. Well, we just took this out to the burn pile
Exactly.
out behind the house, and whatever, they're just comic books, who cares? So a lot of those just disappear too. So
I hear that constantly. Like, my stepdad, for example, like his mom, every time the stack got yay high, went to the burn pile. Like, no matter what was in there, no matter,
Oh no.
Yeah, so he's like, oh yeah, I had that, and so yeah, hear that all the time, and it's sad, but
So I got two other questions for you. I was going to ask you if you feel like we're in a bit of a speculative bubble, and we might be, is what it sounds like. We might be getting to a bit of a recession. How big of a bubble do you think we're in, or do you feel like that's largely deflated?
well, so the big thing that concerns me, I think, when we're talking about the possibility of a bubble right now, is that the types of variants we're seeing made to inflate print runs, like when 1 in 100 variants, 1 in 1,000 variants, all those exist largely to sell more of the regular covers, and then it's harder for those retailers just to sell those covers when you have a book that nobody really, if you're reading that, like specifically, or a fan of that, sure, but like a prime example is that, Keanu Reeves Berserker #1, I think it was a 1 in like,
Yeah.
5,000 or something, and I don't know, like, that combined with, you've got a virgin variant of the trade dress, and then you've got a black and white version of the same cover, and they're making so many variants. So that definitely concerns me, just because we're inflating print runs in that. So the retailers have to order X number to get one of that.
Yeah.
Still though, even with that, we're not seeing numbers like we were in the 90s. We're not seeing, multiple millions of any books printed like X-Men #1 of, 92 or 93 or whatever it was. So and like, but it's also crazy to see like a book like Spawn #1 doing as well as it's doing now, like on the secondary market.
Oh man, another good example of a '90s book that's super crazy, like that. That also did New Mutants. '98 was the same kind of situation. Not a particularly rare book, but still, highly sought after for the same Deadpool-esque reasons, obviously. But and even you know, for nothing other than maybe just his first appearance, because I don't even know if anything else happens in that book that's particularly noteworthy.
I mean, you've got first appearance of Domino and Gideon.
Yeah,
I
but it's
mean,
not like.
No.
Do people other than Gail Simone care about Domino? And people that like Gail Simone, like me, do I care about Domino? Yes. Does your average comic book reader? They should.
But not
They
near
don't.
as
Not as
much
much.
as Deadpool for sure. Yeah.
Not as much.
And I think really with that Wolverine 88, you have one thing with that is it's an interesting book because you've got two well-loved characters. Neither are really a villain. Deadpool was villain for a while, but then obviously went and now it's a hugely fan favorite. Even as a villain, he was a favorite. In a way, you could kind of equate that to like Wolverine 10 from Volume 1, the Sabretooth and Wolverine battle. That book is not expensive at all. But I mean, we had some Sabretooth, in the Wolverine films, not in the MCU really. But like it was never really a like beloved character. It was kind of a quick. I mean, I don't think anybody really got behind that version of the Sabretooth character.
In the movies?
Yeah.
No. Which is weird because like Lev Schreiber is like an excellent actor.
Great actor, yes.
Everything else that he's done is phenomenal, and somehow people were like, eh. What do you feel a recession in comic prices looks like for most people?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so obviously if the economy is kind of in a place where prices overall are kind of iffy and we're seeing some dramatic change, we're going to see more people selling their collections to kind of be able to afford other things.
Right.
The problem with that is at the same time, things are going to cost more still probably, for the average person. And if prices are going down, due to more supply, more people selling their collection, then obviously the price that a dealer is going to be able to pay for that book is going to be lower. So it's
Right.
kind of a double-edged sword where, people need money, but other people aren't going to be able to pay as much for those books, and so it's a tricky place to be in. I mean, it's a great time, in my opinion. Again, not financial advice, but if you're in a place where you can buy those books, then I mean it's a fine line between like I always try to pay as fairly as I can. I never want to take advantage of someone, but you also can't pay more than market rate or a fraction of market rate if you're looking to resell. So
yeah,
it's a weird place to be in on both ends of that, unfortunately.
It sounds like it's probably going to follow general trends for the practical economics of whether people have money or not. But yeah, additional supply and lower demand probably doesn't mean great things for comic collectors or sellers.
I mean, there's always a chance that you can see the comics market going down where the other economy is going up. But at that point, it's a question of, is it like superhero fatigue? Is it a lot of older collectors that are getting out because the market wasn't a good spot and there's not younger collectors then to kind of pick that up? But if we see that, then it's a serious problem for the entire hobby in general, I think, because when everything goes down, everything becomes cheap, nothing is sought after, then all the values are going down. I don't see that happening. It's probably going to be more in line with the overall economy, I'd say, if I had to guess.
Right. Okay. Well, again, thanks for coming talking with me on comics, collecting in general, and what makes books valuable. Again, people can find you on YouTube at No Coast Comics.
Yep, No Coast Comics on YouTube, also Instagram, a lot of places. If you just go to nocoastcomics.com, I've got all my links there. That's easy.
Oh, perfect. That's great. And if somebody wanted to grab a comic shell, we already kind of plugged this, but there's also a link at No Coast Comics to thecomicshell.com.
There is indeed, yeah.
Excellent. Well, perfect. I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for watching. We will see you next week. Peace.